For audio. Looks like audio is working. All right, let's zoom in and see. Get this thing position where we want it. No, that way. Oh, wrong way. It's reversed. Excellent. View. Add unit. And we are officially about 5 minutes out. If you're watching this video after the fact, feel free to roll forward 5 minutes while everybody gets you're into class. Moving forward. Download. Let's see, this should be number 6. Yes, where are we at? So we need to pick up with, okay, domestic stuff. So I think that's where we left off. Okay. Domestic violence, I think it's the next one. Elder abuse, the different forms of that, kidnapping, hate crime, stalking, and bullying. Okay, so they decrease in resolution. That's how these set up. Excellent. Let's see here. So tell me what's going on in the world. I have no idea. I literally I did some work yesterday, but I took off Thursday through basically most of yesterday. Did some stuff, but I was just, my batteries have been so worn out, and it's only halfway through the semester. But you notice I posted a whole bunch of stuff out in this class across all my classes. Later, it should be today, I'll be able to pop out feedback on the first assignment and then second assignment probably. Because that kills me, because it's like that first assignment was quite a few weeks ago. I got the grades out there, which everyone does just fine for that one, because that one's just seeing and navigate. And I did show you guys how to go through the legislative website and navigate that, right? That's why I thought good. Because that's the whole point of that, is so that way you can go out and start looking for that stuff yourself, because the more you can find on your own, the less you need me, right? The less you need anybody to kind of get information for you. And as we move forward into stuff, it's one of the things that you'll get, particularly from like whether it's this class, the law, like the legal side of things, you get a little bit of methods, where you start getting into the realm of what is real versus what isn't. Methods kind of hits it from a direct kind of standpoint, where that's one of the early lessons in there. But here it's sort of like, how is it we process stuff? That's why I mentioned the thing about bees and fish in California, right? It's like we have a whole structure on how to classify animals, and it's like bees and fish. It's like, yeah, they're related, but not that close. What it is, how it's treated in the legal system, because of how it works. And so it's like you've got this reality, the biological one, and then you have legal. And so it's really one of those things. It's like, how are we going to handle this? What is it we're going to recognize, and what is it we're going to say that's normal or not? And how is it we're going to process those exceptions? And so with this class, what you get on it is, to some degree, you see what you want to see, right? When you start getting into the legal side of things, probably what's most interesting to me is it's that landscape of the conversation and how much people can shape that to get people to see what they want, right? That's one of the early lessons here. What is it? The law, the facts, and character, right? In terms of like the types of arguments that take place. Here we're talking court law. More people are coming in. This where I can see it a little bit better. Boom. And so as we're talking about, we're just kind of waxing poetic as time. I am making you listen. Captive audiences. I love it. So we got about 1 more minute. So I was just kind of talking about recapping some stuff. One of the most interesting things to me about the legal realm is that how much of it is determined by what people agree to see. Right? And that's the whole reason why I have a jury. It's the whole reason why we have all these different systems that have to agree to a certain level. This is one because we'll have some interesting conversations related to some of the other sides of today's topics because we'll get into some criminal matters related to people, relationships, and that kind of stuff, because domestic violence stuff. And so we'll talk about that, and then to balance it out, we'll talk about things on the other side, the positive side, because that's the element that people sometimes miss. Like I said, whenever you look at something, you have a tendency to look at what it is that you want to see, not what's actually there. And to some degree, that's good. Some degree, that's bad because you have, that thing called potential, right? And so it's like any court case, any legal principle, anything you're arguing, it's there's potential for a decision to be made related to it one way or another. So it's starting to manage those probabilities. From the outset, the framing of it's probably one of the most unique things. And so today we'll move into the domestic violence stuff here in crim law, and then in terms of other, let's see where the others. I just literally looked at that. Stalking, bullying, that kind of stuff. So what it does is it starts out the more traditional types of violence against persons, the ones that people, the big ones, the serious ones, and it's starting to dial down. Domestics are one of those situations where if you're taking like a policing class, they'll tell you about the how would you want to put it? The volatility, that's probably the best word I put, of those types of incidents. Because whenever you interact with them, like if you're actually dealing with them physically in the moment, you've got, where's my mouse? Over. You have everything going on with all the people who, officers, something like that, you don't know, all the history associated between however many people are there, the health of the relationships between them, and then whatever specific incidents is going on right now. And it's like, it's a violence thing. Okay. Somebody's not going to be happy with somebody. And it's like, how many people are unhappy and with whom? Right. And so, like, Henry, that's the officers tend to kind of like very quickly, like everybody's angry at me for inserting myself in the situation because it's the government. Right. This one, we'll talk a little bit about relationships, that kind of stuff, a little about water. Whenever we finish with this, we'll roll off into that midterm review. We are a week behind, but not really as far behind as I would have thought. I need to post out the next assignment. But I popped out, I think it was one more quiz out there. Yeah. And so you've got quiz 4. Let's see here. What I popping in over here. We'll also go ahead and I can see it share screen. All right. So I think you see the screen. Can that screen? Yes, it looks like it. So I popped out another quiz out there. And then if we get through that, we'll pop this out if we get through it today. Probably won't because there's quite a bit to talk about related to part 6, the domestic stuff. Let's see. So we talked about sex crimes. There's more sex crimes in this as well because you can't separate those things out. It's one of those things that the nature of the act plus the relationships that are involved, plus your intent now start coming into the mix here. So things start getting much more tangled because that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people and all of the negative things can happen. When we first started out talking about this thing, where did I leave off in terms of I don't know if I can ask that actually. Usually I leave off the word of warning about the last topic would be, good God, it's a dangerous one. Basically sexual behaviors and self-protection kind of thing, where it's one of those that as many steps as we're taking to address, and I'll actually back up a slide so you guys can see it a little bit, to address the nature of the crimes we're dealing with here. Oh, there's actually one more thing I want to show you too before we move on. Like you have the nature of what rape is. Historically, it focused on the forcible element of it. It's like that's not all that's there. There were certain forms that weren't even recognized. So it's like huge issues. As we start to address those types of issues, the classes, the types of people, the types of relationships we carved out exceptions for some reason, we started focusing on what actually matters, the consensual nature of it and the factors involved. At the same time, as we start focusing on, realize that it's sort of like, I'm going to do one from policing. Policing, whenever they started having, I think was it the 90s, they started focusing in on race because of the disparities there. what happened is rather than the disparities related to race getting better, initially they got worse because everyone's focusing in on it. And so people were paying attention to make the wrong mistakes, and people were doing it wrong to begin with, figured out how to work the system. And that's what you have right here is you have a whole bunch of opportunities here for people to figure out how to victimize others and protect themselves while doing so, because that's essentially what some of these responses are. Start looking at people who give like contracts and things like that. So those things exist. People do that. Those apps exist. And so it's just a new nightmare. It's not changing anything. It's just moving the problem around. The problem itself is not going to go anywhere. And so that word of warning is protect yourself. The one thing I did not talk about last time that I wanted to, that they sometimes talk about a moral, it's more social. It's like, I don't know if it's necessarily morally bound, because as you read this, you'll see it's like, yeah, they're trying to make some moral distinctions here, but what it is it's something historical in nature. So this is the statute related to forcible sodomy in Oklahoma. If you look, that first line, any person who forces another person. Okay, so that forces word is a negative one. But here's what's something interesting. To engage in the detestable and abominable crime against nature, right? And so what is it they're saying? It's like, it's not just that force, it's just the act itself is something so reprehensible, so morally depraved that itself represents an act against nature, against life itself. And it's like, what are we talking about here? If you read it, it's like the other statutes in there make the criminal act itself negative. I pulled this one out just because it had that moral element tied into this one. Being is because with the nature of that force there, of course, it's evil. The action itself is there evil because force is involved. But this things they're actually classed. So I thought that was kind of interesting because you can pick up on that. Like you can see that right there. Admit. It's like that's not necessarily the best way to do that, but that's what society does. Domestic violences. So we start getting into relationships, that kind of thing. And so we can get right off the bat that depending on the nature of the relationship, how society views it, how society views you, how society views the other person, that maybe or maybe not, it classifies certain things as crimes in the first place, right? Which is itself a problem because that applies in the basic due process, right? We want the laws to apply to people. And so when we start moving into domestic violence situations, we have all the volatility associated with those situations, plus all of the negative things that can take place across those. So all those different relationship types, all of those different, good gosh, I guess you'd say criminal opportunities is horrible, right? And so basically with this slide here, it kind of gets into some of the different ways that we classify these things. Because you have the overall domestic violence, meaning there's violence somewhere in the domicile, handling the domestic relationships there. Intimate partner violence being a newer, I guess I'd say newer phrase. Within the last couple of decades, that one started coming out as a classification for those who I guess you'd say a more overarching term to capture some of the other types of violence that goes in here, because it's not just husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. It can be more, what's what I'm looking for, wider in terms of relationships. That's what the next one talks about, date rape, because that's not someone who's necessarily in a relationship. And like I mentioned last time, we were talking about the overall statute rape. It's one of those questions that can be walked into, is that concept of implied consent, which is a dangerous one, because it's like, as you infer that you're allowing a proximity to somebody for a period of time, that you're allowing them to act in certain ways, you have no regulatory action over that, you just control where you're at. And so that relationship there, where that dynamic really the source of it, ooh, that is a dangerous thing. And so you mentioned marital rape already. It's like until good golly, is that 3 decades ago or is it 4? That was technically not necessarily a crime, right? Marital rape, because it's within the confines of the relationship, was not dictated, was not classified as that. I want to say that was in advance of the Violence Against Women's Act, but that might also be included in that as well. Next one, child abuse. Okay, so you've got the two big categories right there. One's of sexual nature, one's of non-sexual nature, right? So we'll deal with the non-sexual stuff first. Basically, what you start dealing with there is what form of abuse are we dealing with? Are we talking about something that's physical in nature? Are we talking about something that's emotional in nature? Are we talking about something else, right? We start getting into, yes, if you're looking at it from like a methodological standpoint, the way you want to look at it is like there's the way you should treat people. That's going to be a positive thing. And then there's the ways that's going on here, which are negative, right? What's interesting between the abuses and the neglect, neglect's sort of a neutral. You're not giving anything when you're expected to. You have that giving skill, right? And so, this one is that's interesting. We move to the sexual abuse type of stuff. Basically, they break out into broad categories. There's what's the nature of the relationship? Are we talking about familial or not? Right? Because if you're under that age of consent, you don't have the ability to consent. That's one of those bigger conversations. I don't know if we had that one in here last time. The one about who can give consent where and when. It's one of those things that's like massively important. You'll have gotten that lesson also in probably procedures. Where else would it been? So procedures in policing, because there's a couple places where there has to be consent, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Also in evidence, we talked about it a little bit. Consent's one of those things that's very, very, very interesting because depending on the nature of the conversation itself, it may not exist. Depending on the nature of the relationships, they may not exist. And this is one that society sometimes changes on. And so it's one of those things to be particularly sensitive to. How would I say that it's changed? The ways that it recognizes that. It's changing right now. I think probably about 3 weeks ago, I mentioned some of the stuff out in California where you have some widening of those exceptions now, like typically like Romeo and Juliet laws. They allow for like a 2-year age gap, something like that. Maybe it's 4. I forget exactly what it is. Between someone who's turned 18 and someone who's under the age of 18, right? Because that's technically going to fall in that territory of statutory rape. Some places they start to expand that. California, that one element of it, do you have to register for SORNA? That's where they expanded all the way up to 10 years. So it's the first movement kind of that way you'd see, but it's also one that's particularly dangerous. Other situations, political. This one is the one that identifies how much society has changed. If I went back to the mid-90s, right, there was a lot of political stuff going on with the person who's president at the time. Related to his relationship with people who work for him. Like you're talking sitting president and someone who, well, anyone. It's like, okay, the dynamics of the relationship matter. Power in that relationship matters. And in that instance, it's like you're the most powerful person in the world. Like, what does that equate to? It's one of those things. It's like, yeah, how do we manage that as a society? That's one of those. Who knows? They handled it one way in the 90s. It would be handled the same way now. Not necessarily. Probably not at all. When we start getting into, domestic abuse, here's where they start really getting into it, right? Assault, jail not exceeding 30 days, $500. With battery, 90 days, $1,000, right? So you start to see how it increases within the confines of that relationship. If I went back to the actual battery statutes and assault statutes, you'll see that those are different, right? Not a huge amount, but they're different. All right. Let's see here. Commits battery assault against former intimate partner, family, household member. So it lists out the different types of relationships. Then it goes up to 1 year, $5,000. Right? Here has a couple exceptions kind of thing. Here, domestic abuse against pregnant, I didn't do that, against pregnant women. Domestic abuse shall be a felony, punished imprisonment, custody, Okay, here's where you start really getting into it. Boom. You start looking at this. Aggravating factors, that kind of thing. Presence of a child, right? Because when we start dealing with these types of relationships, realize that when we're dealing with relationships, it's not just you're dealing with people. I don't remember if it was in here, if I was in a different class. There's a philosophical principle about the whole being more than the sum of its parts. Like that's good golly, if that's not what the case. Same thing with relationships. You just have a relationship between two people. It's like that thing spans more than just those two. This is a clear example of that, right? And so as you're dealing with that relationship and issues with it, those who are around who are subject to being exposed to it also. This is why some people talk about victims' crimes, and they'll say that there's really no such thing because you have whoever's treating that way to themselves, plus you have all of those who are exposed to the behavior. Ooh. Yeah. All right. Conviction is fine. Next one. Child neglect. Here's where it talks about abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, exploitation, and penalties. Okay. Any parent willfully, maliciously engaged in child abuse, felony, punishable by imprisonment not exceeding life, or imprisonment by county jail not exceeding 1 year, fine not less than $5,000. Is that interesting? I always like looking at that. It's like, okay, what are our parameters for the punishments here? Where's the lowest threshold, the highest threshold? And when we start looking at time versus money. Ooh, that's interesting. All right, next one. Willfully, maliciously engaged in child abuse. I just read that. Enabling child abuse means causing, procuring, permitting the willful or malicious act, harm, threatened, failure to protect, harm. Why did I stop on that one for a second? Ooh, the nature of good and evil, right? This is one of those things that most people don't like to recognize. There are those who enable it too. So it's like whenever we target the behavior, we don't just need to target the behavior itself, we also need to target those who assist in it, right? Talk about aiding and abetting. Same kind of thing here when you look at relationships. That's one of those things that people in the general population don't recognize the malevolence associated with humanity to some degree because, yeah, that's common enough. We have to regulate that, right? People will use children for money or for whatever purpose is there. Usually if you're doing that, procuring that kind of thing. Yeah. Let's see. Child neglect. It means willful or malicious neglect. Enabling child neglect. So even enabling it. Okay, here we're getting sexual abuse stuff where, again, same kind of punishments. Life, 1 year to life. Not less than 500, not more than 5,000. That's interesting. Okay, next one. Continued. And so this thing keeps going, right? And this is how long it gets as it starts getting into various forms of abuse and that kind of stuff. All right. Next one. Age. Specific caveat. Any person, other parent shall willfully and maliciously engage in sexual abuse under 12 be punished by not less than 25 years, nor more than life imprisonment. There you go. I start to put some teeth in it. But realize that that's 1 day difference. Like, ooh. Right? This person's 12, this person's 13. That's 1 day. Right? Okay, let's see how else they handle it. Are there any other ages carved out in there? Willful sexual abuse, not more than 5 months. That's just enabling again. Maliciously shouts under 12 again. Looking for the next age real fast. There you go. Any parent, other person, willfully malicious and child abuse. In this section, enabling child means procuring, permitting. Encouraging child under 18 to engage in prostitution, permitting, encouraging lewd act, obscene behavior, photographic film. So basically every form of thing that they can think of there, right? Notwithstanding the law. Here's 14. Where if you, oh, look at that one. Look at the punishment associated with that one. So that one's related to sodomy, rape by instrumentation, child under 14. Anal, oral sodomy, shall be punished by death or imprisonment with life without parole. Woo. What? That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like, some of those have very, very low thresholds all the way up to life. That, ooh. Technically, this part right here, punished by death. When we were, yeah, that's proportionality. You can't do that. Right? I'm trying to remember the Supreme Court case in the 1970s. Basically, what happened with the murder cases, death penalty cases. We haven't had that talk on the sentencing. We'll have a little bit of talk on it later. Basically, there was a moratorium on the death penalty because of the fact that they had someone who was sentenced to death for, I think it was raping a child, that kind of thing. And that's when society had to make a determination as to whether or not that is proportionate. Don't know, right? The Supreme Court justices had to decide that, and they determined it was not proportionate. Not a life was taken, and so that would be disproportionate for taking a life as a result. And so that one right there, that's a violation of that one doesn't actually, they won't have that one anymore as punishment. But it is still listed in there. So that kind of a thing. All right, elder abuse. So we talked about the relationships. Another way to look at this are special populations, right? Those that you love, that'd be intimate partners, that kind of thing. Children, right? Those who are protected populations, like the elderly. It's the next one, right? So you start thinking about it. Another way to think about it would be for these two groups, think about it in terms of cognitive abilities, right? As you were really young and you start to get older, you start out with lower cognitive abilities than for us. So that sensitivity is going to be on the lower end. Vice versa in the opposite direction for elders, right? And so what you have here is you have as those abilities decrease over time, people look to, well, they find a suitable target, right? So you start dealing with protected categories of persons. Boop. Next one. All right. Abuse, sexual exploitation, neglect of vulnerable adults, right? Felony, any persons responsible to care for someone who purposefully, knowingly, recklessly neglects shall be convicted of, see, not more than 2 years or $10,000. Shall consider any person elderly incapacity victim is act. So that's a whole act that defines that. What a victim, an elderly or incapacitated person is. And so all these things have definitions. Boop. I guess that's all I put on that one. Realize that I think there's one later that covers a whole bunch of them. Realize that what they're talking about there is everything from abuse and neglect, that kind of stuff, to the sexual stuff, like the perverse, to the I'm just wanting to take care of them and defraud them of all of their money, right? All of those things and more, probably. I'm just not being very creative like criminals are, right? Okay, so next one's false imprisonment and kidnapping. Can't remember if I talked about this one with the self-defense stuff and the violence stuff because those overlap so closely. This is why you should never do citizen's arrest, because what have you done? Kidnapping or false imprisonment, right? If you have the difference between these two things is basically aspiratation, right? You've moved someone, right? That's the difference. Otherwise, you're just confining them, right? Freedom. Freedom of what? Freedom of movement, right? That's going to echo with if you had procedures. Fourth Amendment issues, that's the big determination for whether or not you're free. Right? Can you move? Ooh. Well, depends. Unlawful restraint of a person against their wishes to deny freedom. Restricting the victim and removing the victim from one place to another. So that aspiratation element, right? When we see it in the statutes, kidnapping defined. Any person who, without lawful authority, seizes, confines, inveigles, decoys, kidnaps, abducts, or carries away another with intent either to cause them to be confined against their will or to take them out of the state. Slavery, right? This is where we start getting real quick, realizing these aren't the most serious of crimes, too. That's kind of interesting. Except for persons sentenced to life or life without parole on after the effective date of the act. Any person sentenced to imprisonment for violation of section of offense, sexual exploitation, mandatory post-prison imprisonment, supervision, and induction. So that's one of those things. I pulled that one in there because that's pretty interesting. All right. Next up. Oh, I guess kidnapping. So there's a few other ones. Kidnapping for the purpose of extortion, holding hostages, human trafficking, right? This one right here, so I skipped one. I'm trying to remember what that one was. Holding hostage, the Telephone Communications Act actions. That has to relate to making the phone calls themselves, even even making phone calls is one of those things that has to be defined. Okay, hate crimes. So here's where I move into a little bit of a different topic. I don't know if I have it in here. No methods has something in there with hate crimes. I can't remember if I have one in here. I think I do. This right here is an interesting thing because what this is this is another classification on top of the previously established classifications for crime, right? So a hate crime, what is a hate crime? Basically, it's a crime that differs in itself because of the purpose of it, right? It's not because of anything other than its motivation, whether it's an assault, a battery, a murder, committing arson, right? Any of those things. It's like those can be hate crimes. So it's not any one specific crime. It's a designation related to the intent of the purpose. So this is one we pulled down. It's interesting in that fact that, well, the history of it right there, that Matthew Shepard, James Byrd. I don't remember the story for James Byrd Jr. I remember the one for Matthew Shepard. That was somewhere in the 90s. I want to say it's early 90s. Are any of you familiar with that story? Okay, so this has been up north. I wish I could remember the state. It's like somewhere like Wisconsin, Michigan, North Dakota, somewhere up in the central northern United States. Rural area. Matthew Shepard was a gay, white, male. Can't remember his age. I think he was driving age. I can't remember. I want to say it was over the age of 16. I can't remember. But still in high school, right? Basically, what happened to him was a group of high schoolers took him out into the country, tied him up to a fence post, and beat him to death. Beat him so badly, left him there overnight. He died. Yeah. Why? Because he was gay. Like, yeah, that's evil, right? And that's kind of a different kind of evil. It's one of those things that's really, really, really interesting when you dive into it because of the cultural aspects of it. Because domestic stuff, relationships one-on-one, right? Usually in these types of instances, you got a violent incident. What is that? That is a one moment in time. These specific people, boom, done. Right now, you got to figure out what the fallout is. Right, start moving into these things. Before you get to the hate crimes, the relationship stuff. It's no longer just the fact of what you did or the fact that who you are. It's also the relationship between. Now it's not even that. It's I don't know. What is this? You belong. It's like speaking up north, it'd be like Green Bay Packers fans versus Vikings. What is this? OU versus Texas? I don't care, right? That's one of those things that's like I really don't understand it because it's what you start dealing with there. Probably from the most basic principle is you have someone who hates an entire group of people for some reason, whatever it is, and they may not even know anything about that group, right? And so this hate that's embedded into a cultural kind of thing that gets transmitted by usually some of the worst people in society. But you got that thing over there that causes them to view this other group over here differently, and now they're acting on that. Something completely different, right? Ooh, that is the best phrase, the best question I've ever heard from anyone who ever delved into racial issues. How can you hate me? You don't even know me, right? Because that's what it is. There's a whole bunch of people who are going to be associated with that group. In this case, you're talking about sexual orientation, right? A whole bunch of people. You have some perceived notion related to that people. You act on that perception, right? In this case, it's hate. Here we go. Malicious intimidation, harassment because of race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, disability. Standard reporting system. No person shall maliciously, with specific intent to intimidate, harass, because person's race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, or disability. Assault, batter, damage, destroy, vandalize, deface, threaten by word or act. Okay. Let's keep going. No person shall maliciously, with specific intent to incite, produce imminent violence. So there's incitation related to. So there's your pointy headed ghost people, I guess. I don't, yeah, but that's kind of what you're getting at there. You're trying to incite people. Okay. Can do it at scale. This one could just be individual, though, if you really look at it. Violence directed against another person. Yeah. Broadcast. So that's more incitation here. What do you think about that? I'm going to go back. Okay. Matthew Shepard, what did I say that was about? Is there anything missing in this list? This is one of those things that's always really interesting because here's where you see a little bit of both sides of it. So there's the negative side of dealing with crime. There's all the fallout related to it. There's the actions we take to try to address, and then there's a fallout from that too. You also have to look at the positive sides a little bit every now and then. This one, big problem is that this doesn't say anything about sexual orientation or anything like that, right? You start getting in sexual orientation, sexual identities, and those types of things, which are big issues in today's society now. They were bigger issues, a couple decades ago, really, if you really want to get into it. That's not in here. Race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, disability. How do we treat it? Most of the time, we try to treat it the same way. Try to include that in here. So it's one of those things. It's not specifically in the laws that we treat those things the same way most of the time. It's one of those things that's really, really interesting. Was it ADA? I want to say the American with Disabilities Act. That group and there was something else. It was equal employment opportunity. That's what it was. It's like it'll have these things in here, but it doesn't speak to that other one, even though we know quite literally it's directly related. And so it's one of those you kind of have to see the interpretations there. And for the most part, society handles it correctly. Otherwise, well, you'd hear a lot more about that, I'm sure. Not say problems don't happen, it's just that's there too. The next one, last two, stalking and bullying. Give me a functional definition of stalking. My favorite definition I've ever gotten of stalking I actually got from another PhD in criminal justice who's not associated with this university. It was a really funny one. So when two people go out for a walk in the woods and only one person knows about it. Oh, that's horrible, right? So what do you have when you have stalking? Why did I use that definition? If you look at this is more about fear. This is about you identify the fact that you have a stalker and they still won't leave you alone, right? And so the first thing you need to recognize is that I guess there are creepy people out there. I don't know. Really, what it is that nature of this thing itself, stalking, is kept purposely from eye most of the times, unless you start moving into more of the harassing type of behaviors. Really, is what you're getting at here. This is, you start to cross that gap into it's more harassment than it is stalking. Because stalking, it's like, that means they're watching all the time. Yeah, but sometimes you don't know that they're there. Here's where it talks about intentionally recklessly engage, of course, contact, target a specific person, cause a reasonable person's circumstances to fear. Fear for what? Safety of others, themselves, that kind of thing. Immediate family members and target persons actually placed in such fear. So you have an actual place. So you have to do something there. That can be like the repeated showing up at certain places, certain times, that kind of creepy stuff, right? You have to establish a pattern though, to some degree. Okay. Being served, notice, protective order. Person recklessly engaged in at least one act listed in the subsection that violates the provisions of the order. And again, so there's your second time right there, right? You have to have all this happen take first. You have to get that protective order, that kind of thing. And then at that point in time, does it actually get, okay, maybe we'll do something. Okay. And then the next one I put on here is cyber stalking. Why do you think I did that? Cyber stalking is really creepy. I think somebody standing outside in the bushes is creepy. When they can turn on your computer's camera. Ooh. Some of my favorite stories involve hackers and hacking someone's computer or whatever it was. They're watching all of a sudden. Boom, you get an email. Hey, here's a picture of you. Hi, I see you. Tell me that's not creepy, right? This one's more interesting because it's in some ways easier to detect, in some ways harder. If you know how to detect it, you can find it. But most people don't, right? And the vulnerabilities there, the dangers associated with there's something that I also like to stress to you guys because it's like take your social media, just your social media stuff, your stuff that people put there. Facebook, Instagram. I'm forgetting some others. Instagram. There's some other ones. Twitter. Probably some other ones I'm forgetting. Okay. Think one person, how many of those different accounts do they have? Right? How many different types of information they post out there, what kinds of information that is. And if someone's wanting to track you down, what it would take for them to figure out everything they need to be able to do it. Right? The difference between cyber stalking and stalking. To some degree, cyber stalking is you do the stalking for them. Sometimes, right? There actually used to be a website, I've mentioned this one before, I think. It used to be called Creepy. Because what it did is it linked up those different websites. So if you start searching for someone, you found them, it would bring up their linked accounts across those different platforms. So you can quickly start doing it, right? Had a criminologist, God, this probably been like 7-8 years ago, told a story about being in New York's Central Park, seeing a jogger take a picture of her. Yeah, it's in Central Park at such and such time. Let's give it 3 days. Going through, okay. I want to see pictures that were taken in Central Park in the hours between whatever, right? Do a couple hour window. Okay, there's a couple hundred pictures. Oh, that's her. Guess what? Now I've got her Facebook or Instagram. Oh, guess what? Now I can see friend groups. I can see what pictures are available, even if they are secured. It's like, okay, who's in the pictures? Where are they taken at? What's the, right? Now they start to get familiar with everything that you're doing everywhere around you, and including the inside of your home, the insides of businesses you go to, that kind of stuff. Super, super creepy, right? And so the difference between these two things is this one you get to know just how creepy it is because you'll see that person staring at you in the back of the room, right? And then you'll see him somewhere else. And then you'll see him somewhere else. And then there you go. This one, ooh. I don't know. Well, you know, that's its own thing. The bullying element, see, Oklahoma statutes right here. Maliciously, repeatedly harasses, falls another, right? And it gives you an idea of following feels terrorized, frightened, intimidated, threatened, harassed, molested, that kind of a thing. Here from there. Oh, good golly, this thing's too big. Okay. Any person commits the act of stalking within 10 years, completion, execution sentence for prior convictions. So basically, how long it takes, different circumstances. What? Some ways when you look at this, it's specific caveats related to the issue itself. In some ways, it's related to issues that repeatedly come up. That's going to be some of these things. It's like this person's been repeatedly on probation or parole, that kind of thing, because you'll have people who have repeated issues with this. And so that's why it has the stepping up. Right? If you've done this, the next going to be even more punishment. Okay. Determine the crime of stalking. The following definitions apply. Harasses, pattern of conduct. Pattern means more than one, right? Course of conduct, pattern of conduct, two or more separate acts. However short, meaning it has to be, there's a time element in there. You have to make the pattern have to be two distinct events, two distinct things. But that time frame doesn't have to be necessarily days, weeks, months, hours kind of thing. Okay. Emotional distress, suffering or distress, not medical, right? Unconsented contact, you know what that is. Member of immediate family, you know that. Following, tracking of movement, location of an individual through GPS, other monitoring device, right? So all those things are included. Ooh, that's too big. So in terms of as technology increases, the ability for people to do this to others, ooh, that is so dangerous. That'd be like me talking about the use of metadata and that kind of thing. What can someone do with information about what would it be? Take that example from the person at Times Square or Times Park, wherever, Central Park. What you get from that, if you really track it, you have hours of posting, hours of activity, the locations associated with it, should they be actually geocoded, geolocated, all that kind of stuff. So basically you have when this person works, when they're asleep, who they hang out with, when they're active, and where they go, right? And that's just right off the bat. And so very, very dangerous stuff. Make sure you're always aware of the information you put out there. Yes. But then realize that in terms of regulation, how society has to regulate it is a long and involved process. And so, ooh, very, very dangerous thing. Bullying. Repeated use by one or more students of written, verbal, electronic expression. It's not just students, though. I do like that one out. Any combination thereof, victim causes physical, emotional harm, victim damage property, fear, damage, hostile environment, infringes on the rights of the victim, materially disrupts school. For the purposes of section, bullying shall include cyberbullying. Right? I guess I didn't put the statute there on that. Basically, what you start getting there is the nature of the contact itself. Any one singular incident, is it something that would be considered bullying or not? Right. And so think about, you start thinking about those minor, low-level behaviors, right? You have everything from the most serious, death, all the way up to, okay, here's how you're interacting with other people. Is this considered positive or negative? And really what it is with this one, bullying, you start getting into that deprivation of one's free will. Right? At the very initial outset, and then think about the effects of bullying. So that's one of those things that this one's going to grow because it's probably one of the wider areas, largest numbers, some serious effects, but not the same numbers as the other stuff. Should I have anything else in there related to that? I guess not. Okay, so we've got 7 minutes. You guys want to start a review or you want to call it a day? You guys got real quiet. What do you want to do? Stop share. We'll stop share for a minute. How's that? You guys are still real quiet. Why are you so quiet? It's a midterm grade. I think, how many, did I give you multiple attempts on it? I can't remember. I think I might have only signed it up for once. Yeah, so far we've only had one. I need to post out a couple more. So we've got the one assignment and what is it? 3 quizzes now, 4 quizzes. Yeah. And so this one's due Wednesday. This next one's due Monday. And so what we'll do is we'll do the review next class, and then we'll make that exam due, would it be Wednesday the 30th? It's not hard. Just make sure you take the quizzes a few times. Right. It's not that bad. Just knowing the elements and where to find the stuff's the big stuff. Knowing the arguments that underlie these things and how to set up the if you were to make an argument, identifying those logical debates, seeing where those issues are. For example, with what would be one that probably might have the bullying thing, right? When are we talking about bullying? When are we not? When are we talking about governmental intrusion into one's relationships? And when are we talking about outside persons regulating other people's relationships, right? Because the two people involved might not necessarily call it bullying, but is it bullying, right? What's the difference between that and two junior high kids horsing around? Ooh, right? So how much do we want to dial into that? How hard do we want to regulate it? Those are essentially the kinds of things that we get into at each of these different levels. And so as long as you kind of have a general idea of what some of those debates are for each of these topics, you're just fine. I mean, that's really what it is, being able to understand two sides of an argument and being able to, if you need to pick a side, but at least be able to identify where the bandwidth is, where the threshold is. This is the how serious it is, how low level is the different types of things that are involved, right? And this stuff, all we've really gone through are, let's see, crimes against persons, murder, elements of law, that kind of thing, defenses, affirmative defenses. But all that stuff will come directly from the quizzes and the exams. So long as you take those a few times, you'll be set for it. But we'll go through and run through the review next time, see if there's anything that I've left off. Anything I might have skipped over. Some of those questions might key into something I might have forgotten. In the meantime, I'll be looking at assignments. I need to post some of those out. It'll be later today, maybe lunchtime. I'm just gonna see you play that one by ear. But if you have any questions or need anything, I'm actually back to answering emails though, albeit slowly. I spent what time I did work over the weekend catching everything up and getting it lined out for the rest of the semester. So, guys, ready to have fun and take your first big exam and be the ultimate determinant for the rest of your lives? It's not. Yeah, it's like not what this is at all. Before we go, I will have a quick. No problem. It's up to you guys. 4 minutes. Probably the biggest thing for me in my classes, I don't know if it's the same way across your classes or not, has to do with approach to classes. I know grades matter, everyone, points matter, everyone. They don't matter one iota to me. They never did. What matters to me is one, that everybody's learning, but two, it's that pursuit, that scholarship, that kind of thing. So long as you guys are reading materials that are out there, you're doing the work, it's like you're doing what you need to be doing. You don't need to worry or anything. This class is not one of my worrying classes. I've got a couple that more people in there because of the nature of it. That's like methods. Everybody worries about methods. Don't worry about it. It's not that hard. The big thing, make sure you guys are starting to build those social connections across your peer group, because as you guys graduate, you guys go into different fields or same field but different areas. Huge resource. And if you guys are thinking about graduate school, what ends up happening is you already have an established peer group. You go into it and start learning from each other. It's a very, very useful thing. And if you're thinking about graduate school, let me know, because that's one that we have, that accelerated degree program. We have, of course, you just want to finish off the degree and then move into the master's program. Those are options. But one of the big things that I like people to do is you get a little bit in methods and theory at the undergraduate, you get more of it in graduate level. Looking to see how research works, because to some degree, that research side of things is just like this. You're probably seeing parallel this semester already, right? Because it's exactly the same thing. There's usually some type of argument or debate, whether you're dealing with in law, when you go into law and you're in the courtroom. It's literally that specific instance, right? That incident, whatever exactly happened, and you figure out where the weaknesses are and pull those in whatever directions you want, or the strengths. It's the same thing for the research stuff. It's just rather than dealing with one thing that's actually specific and concrete, you deal with maybe that, or maybe you deal with like large groups of numbers and looking at differences between people. And so a little bit different, but it's really the same thing. But with that, we are out of time for today. If you guys need anything, email me, let me know. Don't forget about the quizzes. More assignments soon, but otherwise, catch you on Wednesday. All right. Take care and have a great day.